Think about the most influential people you know, the decision makers, the negotiators, the leaders everyone respects. They don't talk the most. They talk the least. Yet somehow, when they speak, the entire room listens. The entire situation shifts. This isn't charisma. This isn't luck. This is a specific communication law that most people never discover. Today, you will learn it. You will understand why silence is louder than any speech. You will discover the exact mechanics of how fewer words create more influence. And you will never speak the same way again. This is the law of minimal communication. And it changes everything. Chapter 1: The Myth of the Talkative Leader. Let me start by asking you a question. Who do you respect more? The person who talks constantly, offering opinions on everything, jumping into every conversation, making sure everyone knows they're in the room? Or the person who speaks rarely, but when they do, everyone stops and listens? You already know the answer. And that answer is the foundation of everything we're going to discuss. Most people believe the opposite of the truth. They believe that more talking equals more authority. More talking equals more credibility. More talking equals more presence. So they talk. They talk constantly. They offer ideas in meetings they weren't asked to contribute to. They explain things that don't need explaining. They fill every silence with words. And they wonder why nobody respects them. That's the misconception that kills your influence. That's the lie that's been holding you back. Let me paint you a picture. There's a meeting. 10 people. One person has spoken 7 times. They've offered ideas. They've added commentary. They've tried to be helpful. They've positioned themselves as valuable. By the end of the meeting, nobody remembers their name. Nobody remembers what they said. They were noisy. Then there's another person in the same meeting. They've spoken once, maybe twice. But when they spoke, the entire room shifted. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Everyone listened. And what they said mattered. It moved the conversation forward. It changed the direction of the discussion. That person will be remembered. More words equal less authority. That's the key. Now I want to be very clear about something. The talkative person thinks they're being valuable. They think they're contributing. They think they're showing engagement, intelligence, and involvement. In reality, they're broadcasting something completely different. They're broadcasting insecurity. When you talk too much, you're signaling several things at once. First, you're signaling anxiety. You're anxious about being judged, so you're constantly performing. You're constantly proving. You're constantly working to convince people that you're smart and capable. Confident people don't need to do that. They already know who they are. Second, you're signaling that you don't trust others to understand you. You think you need to explain everything multiple times. You think you need to add additional context, examples, and justification. But confident communicators trust that their message landed the first time. If it didn't, they'll find out. Third, you're signaling that you need validation. You're looking for agreement. You're looking for acknowledgement. You're looking for someone to say, yes, that's a good point. When you need that validation, it's obvious. And it makes you look weak. Your silence speaks louder than your words. Remember that. Now let's talk about what happens when you actually observe how sales work. Real sales. Not the aggressive, pushy stereotype. Real sales. The kind where the salesperson closes the deal, and the client feels like they made a great decision. Watch a salesperson who dominates the conversation. They talk about the product. They talk about the features. They talk about the benefits. They talk about the price. They talk about the timeline. They talk constantly. And by the end of the call, the client is overwhelmed. The client is irritated. The client says they need to think about it. And they never call back. Now watch a salesperson who speaks strategically. They ask questions. They listen to the answers. They ask follow-up questions. They listen more. And when they speak, it's to reflect back what the client said or to present a solution that addresses what the client revealed. The client feels understood. The client feels like the salesperson actually cares about solving their problem. And the client says yes. One person talks their way out of the sale. The other person listens their way into the sale. This isn't about being shy or passive. This is about strategy. This is about understanding that every word you speak has a cost. Every word you speak either adds to your influence or subtracts from it. When you talk too much, you're spending your influence on things that don't matter. You're diluting your message. You're broadcasting noise instead of a signal. Let me give you the research because this matters. Studies consistently show that leaders who speak less are rated as more competent and more trustworthy than leaders who speak more. Not less trustworthy, more trustworthy. Why? Because when you speak less, you create space. You create the perception that you're selective with your words. You create the impression that you know something they don't. You become a source of insight rather than a source of noise. Mystery creates authority. Authority creates influence. That's the key. Think about CEOs. The ones who communicate sparingly are perceived as more strategic, more visionary, more intelligent. Those who are constantly communicating, explaining, and sharing are perceived as anxious, as uncertain, as trying too hard. You have a choice right now. You can keep believing that more talking will get you what you want. Or you can start testing the opposite. You can start operating from the principle that fewer words create more influence. And I'm telling you, when you start testing it, you'll see the shift immediately. People will start listening more carefully when you speak. Your ideas will carry more weight. Your presence will become more powerful. Not because you changed who you are, but because you changed how you communicate. You've just discovered the foundation. You understand now that the talkative leader is actually the weak leader. The quiet leader is the strong leader. But knowing that silence is powerful isn't enough. You need to understand how to use silence effectively. You need to understand how to strategically deploy quiet in conversation. Chapter 2: The Power of Strategic Silence. Silence is not the absence of communication. Silence is communication. It may be the most powerful form of communication available to you. And most people have no idea how to use it. They think silence is a mistake. They think it means something went wrong. They think they failed. So they rush to fill it. They panic. They talk. And in talking, they give away all their power. The strategic communicator sees silence completely differently. Silence is a tool. Silence is a weapon. Silence is how you move the conversation exactly where you want it to go. Let me show you how this works in a real scenario. A negotiation. Two people are sitting across from each other. One side makes an offer. What happens next is critical. Most people do this. The person who made the offer immediately starts explaining. They explain why the offer is fair. They explain the reasoning. They add context and justification. By the time they're done talking, they've talked themselves down from the offer. They've revealed insecurity. They've created space for the other side to push back. The strategic negotiator does something completely different. They make the offer, and then they stop talking. They pause. They let the silence exist. And in that silence, something interesting happens. The other person feels pressure. The other person wants to fill the silence. And the other person fills it with their own thoughts, with their own concerns, with their own vulnerabilities. And suddenly, the strategic negotiator knows exactly what matters to them. The other person, desperate to fill the silence, might say, "Well, the price is a bit high." Now the strategic negotiator has information. Now they know exactly what to address. And they do it without giving anything away. Silence is a negotiation tool. That's the key. But there's more to it than that. There's the power of the pause in conversation. Most people don't understand how to use pauses. They think pauses mean they're thinking too slowly. They think pauses mean something is awkward. So they rush through their speech. They talk rapidly. They try to sound smart by filling every second with words. The strategic communicator uses pauses intentionally. After they say something important, they pause. They let the words land. They don't rush to fill the silence with qualifying statements or additional explanation. They let their words sit. They let the listener absorb them. And that pause signals confidence. It signals that what was just said was important enough to deserve space. Think about how this works in an interview. Someone asks you a difficult question. The nervous candidate rushes to answer. They start talking immediately. They ramble. They contradict themselves. They add things they shouldn't add. Why? Because they're uncomfortable with silence. Because they think silence means they're failing. The strategic candidate does something different. They pause. They think about the question. They take a breath. They compose themselves. And then they answer thoughtfully. When they're done answering, they pause again. And they wait. And the interviewer perceives them as intelligent, thoughtful, in control. That pause is more powerful than any elaborate answer could ever be. But here's the most important part. You have to develop comfort with silence. And I mean real comfort. Not forced, fake comfort. Real, genuine comfort with quiet. This is difficult. Our entire culture is designed to fill silence. We have background music everywhere. We have podcasts filling every moment. We have notifications constantly. We're trained to believe that silence is uncomfortable and needs to be filled. But the strategic communicator flips this. They become so comfortable with silence that others feel uncomfortable. And when other people are uncomfortable, the strategic communicator has the advantage. You have the upper hand. You have control. Here's what you need to do. Start practicing right now. In conversation, after you speak, don't immediately follow up. Pause. Breathe. Let the silence exist. It will feel uncomfortable. That's the point. You're retraining your nervous system. You're teaching yourself that silence isn't dangerous. Silence is power. In meetings, practice sitting quietly. Don't rush to speak. Don't try to fill the silence with your own comments. Let others talk. And notice what you learn by listening instead of speaking. Notice the advantage you gain from understanding what others are thinking. Your comfort with silence creates others' discomfort and your advantage. That's the key. This is where your power comes from. This is how you start moving from being a talkative person to being a strategic one. This is how you start to develop real influence. But having the power of silence isn't enough if you don't know what to do with the words you do speak. You need to understand something crucial. The words you eliminate are more important than the words you say. You need to master the art of omission. Chapter 3. The words you eliminate matter more than the words you speak. Most people focus on the wrong thing. They focus on what they should say. What message do they need to communicate? What they need to add to the conversation. They're always thinking about adding more. The strategic communicator thinks the opposite way. They focus on what they should not say. Every word they eliminate increases the power of every word they keep. That's the key. Think about it. If you say 10 words and 8 of them are filler, then only 2 words matter. The listener is distracted. The listener is confused. The listener doesn't remember what you actually said. But if you say 10 words and all 10 of them matter, if every single word is essential, then all 10 words land. All 10 words have impact. This is the discipline of omission. And it's where most people fail completely. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. 2 people presenting the same idea to the same audience. Person A says this, "Well, I've been thinking about this, and I kind of think that maybe we should consider doing something like a new approach to the whole social media thing, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm not totally sure about this, but I think it could possibly help our overall brand presence and maybe get us more engagement." That person just buried their idea under piles of weak language. Let's count the damage. Well, weakens the opening. "I've been thinking" suggests it's not fully formed. "Kind of" is a qualifier that weakens the assertion. Maybe removes certainty. Something like "is vague." If that makes sense, seeks approval. "I mean" is a verbal filler. "I'm not totally sure" destroys credibility, but negates what came before. Think instead of know. Could possibly removes responsibility. Maybe again. Overall is vague. That person's idea is already dead before they finish speaking. Person B says this: our social media strategy needs to shift to performance-based content. Here's why. Here's the timeline. Here's the expected results. 12 words. All essential. All powerful. No qualifiers. No seeking approval. No uncertainty. Just clarity. Which person's idea gets adopted? The second one. Every time. Every word you eliminate increases the power of what remains. That's what you need to remember. Now, there are specific words and phrases that are particularly destructive. These are the real killers. If you use these, you've already lost before you even make your point. Qualifiers are permission requests. That's the key. The strategic communicator eliminates every single one of these from their vocabulary. They state their position clearly. They don't qualify. They don't hedge. They don't seek approval. They communicate with conviction because conviction is contagious. But here's something even more sophisticated. It's not just about removing weak words. It's about strategic omission of information. What you don't mention is as important as what you do. Think about a lawyer. An excellent lawyer doesn't present every piece of evidence. They present the strongest evidence. They let it speak. They don't over-explain. They don't add weak points that undermine the strong ones. They omit the weak and amplify the strong. Think about a parent setting a boundary. An excellent parent doesn't explain every reason the boundary exists. You have a curfew of 10 p.m. because I love you and I need to know where you are, and I've read research about teenage sleep, and I care about your safety. That parent is seeking agreement. That parent is explaining and justifying. The strategic parent says, curfew is 10 p.m. That's it. Done. The boundary stands because it stands. It doesn't need justification. Strategic omission as persuasion. That's the principle. When you eliminate unnecessary details, examples, and explanations, you force your audience to focus on what matters. You also make them work slightly harder to fill in the gaps. And when people do cognitive work, they become more invested in the conclusion. They feel like they figured it out. And they're more likely to act. Omission creates focus. Focus creates acceptance. That's the key. Here's what you do starting today. Write down something you need to communicate. Then eliminate every unnecessary word. Remove every qualifier. Remove every permission request. Remove every hedging phrase. Make every word essential. Count the original words and the new words. You'll be shocked at how much more powerful fewer words are. This is the discipline that separates influential people from ineffective people. No more talking. Strategic reduction. Strategic elimination. Strategic precision. You're learning how to speak less powerfully. But speaking is only half the equation. The other half is asking questions. And questions are far more powerful than statements. Chapter 4. The question is mightier than the statement. Here's a principle that will change how you approach every conversation. When you make a statement, you're presenting information. The other person can accept it or reject it. You've done the work. You've made your point. Now it's their choice. They have power. But when you ask a question, you're doing something completely different. You're directing. You're controlling the conversation. The other person has to respond. And in responding, they reveal what matters to them. Questions create compliance. Statements create resistance. That's the key. Let me show you how this plays out in sales. Because sales is where this principle becomes most obvious. A traditional salesperson says, "This product will save you time." That's a statement. The prospect can agree or disagree. The salesperson has made a claim. Now the prospect gets to evaluate it. A strategic salesperson asks, "How much time are you currently spending on this task each week?" Now the prospect has to think, has to engage, has to do with cognitive work. And in answering, they've actually done the sales work themselves. They've thought about the problem. They've quantified it. And now, when the salesperson offers the solution, the prospect has already convinced themselves that they need it. One person is trying to convince the other. The second person is helping the other person convince themselves. Here's why this matters neurologically. When someone makes a statement to you, your brain automatically creates resistance. It's called cognitive dissonance. Your brain wants to maintain consistency. So if someone tells you something that doesn't align with what you already believe, your brain pushes back. It creates arguments. It finds reasons to disagree. But when you ask a question, the other person's brain has to work to find the answer. And when they find the answer themselves, their brain doesn't resist it. They believe it because they discovered it. This is why questions are mightier than statements. They move the other person from resistance to discovery. Now, not all questions are equal. There's a hierarchy. You need to understand when to use which type. Surface-level questions get surface-level answers. How's your day? Busy. That's it. Nothing revealed. Nothing learned. Diagnostic questions go deeper. What's been the biggest challenge you've faced this month? Now the person has to think. They have to reflect. And they reveal something real. Visionary questions move people toward change. What would be possible if you solved that challenge? Now the person isn't just thinking about their problem. They're imagining a future without it. They're starting to want change. The most influential communicators use all three types in sequence. First, they establish rapport with surface-level questions. Then they dig deeper with diagnostic questions. Then they move the person toward change with visionary questions. By the end of the conversation, the other person feels like they discovered what they need to do without you telling them. Let them discover it. Influence them through inquiry. That's the key. But there's a special type of question that most people don't understand. It's the rhetorical question. A question that doesn't require an answer. It's asked to create thought, to create realization, to create discomfort that drives change. A teacher asks a student, "What do you think would happen if you actually studied?" That question isn't looking for an answer. The student knows the answer. The student answers themselves internally. And the question does the work of the lecture without the teacher having to say anything. A manager asks an employee, "How many chances do you think you get to show up late?" Again, not looking for an answer. The employee answers internally. The message lands. The change might happen. Rhetorical questions followed by silence are one of the most powerful communication moves available. You plant the seed. You don't explain it. You let the other person figure it out. Questions that don't need answers change minds. That's the key. Now here's something critical. You need to practice asking questions more than making statements. Most people do the opposite. They make statements constantly and ask questions rarely. You need to flip that. In your next conversation, commit to asking at least twice as many questions as you make statements. Push back on your urge to tell. Resist the impulse to advise. Instead, ask. Ask about their situation. Ask about their challenges. Ask about their goals. Ask about their constraints. The more you ask, the more you understand. And the more you understand, the more you can influence. You're shifting from presentation to exploration. From telling to discovering. From statement to question. This is how you build real influence. Not through more words, but through better questions. Not through telling people what to do, but through asking them questions that help them see what they should do. But there's one more element that makes questions work. And that's listening. Real listening. Not just waiting for your turn to talk. Chapter 5. The listener always wins. Most people think they know what listening is. They think listening is sitting quietly while the other person talks. Meanwhile, they're mentally preparing their response. They're thinking about what they're going to say next. They're judging what the other person is saying. They're planning how they'll counter it. That's not listening. That's waiting for your turn. Real listening is completely different. Real listening is an act of power. Real listening is an interrogation. Real listening is gathering intelligence. Listen to win. Talk to entertain. That's the key. When you actually listen, you learn things about the other person that they wouldn't normally reveal. You learn what they need, what they fear, what they want, what they care about, what threatens them, what excites them. Armed with that knowledge, you have influence they don't even realize you have. Most people in most conversations don't feel heard. They feel like the other person is waiting for their turn. They feel judged. They feel like the other person doesn't care what they're saying. So they protect themselves. They don't reveal what's really going on. They stay guarded. But when you actually listen, something shifts. The other person feels it. And they reveal things they wouldn't normally reveal. They become vulnerable. And vulnerability creates influence. Think about a therapist. A therapist doesn't tell the client what to do. The therapist listens. The therapist asks questions. The therapist creates space for the client to figure out their own answers. By the end of the session, the client feels like they figured it out. They feel heard. They feel understood. And because they feel heard, they take action. Now, think about a mediator in a conflict. The mediator doesn't take sides. The mediator doesn't tell people what the solution is. The mediator listens to each side. Really listens. Not to judge. Not to evaluate. But to understand what each person actually needs. And once the mediator understands what each person needs, the mediator can guide them toward a solution that serves both needs. But here's the thing. Most people can't listen without judgment. They listen and immediately evaluate. Immediately judge. Immediately categorize what they're hearing as right or wrong, good or bad, smart or stupid. And the moment you judge, the other person feels it. And they shut down. Real listening is non-judgmental. You listen to understand, not to evaluate. You listen to learn, not to judge. You listen to find common ground, not to prove yourself right. Listening creates permission to be vulnerable. That's the key. Here's what's interesting. When someone feels genuinely heard, they tell you things they wouldn't tell anyone else. An employee feels heard by their manager and trusts that manager completely. That trust is worth more than any amount of oversight or micromanagement could ever achieve. A client feels heard by a salesperson and becomes loyal beyond price. A partner feels heard by their significant other and opens themselves completely. But there's something even more valuable than the information you get from listening. There's the leverage you gain from truly understanding the other person. When you listen completely, you sometimes understand the other person better than they understand themselves. You understand what they need, what they fear, what they want. What would motivate them? What would turn them away? Armed with that knowledge, you can influence them, not through manipulation, through alignment. Understand them completely. Influence them naturally. That's the key. Think about a manager who knows their employee fears being left behind in their career. This fear has been revealed through listening. The manager doesn't exploit this fear. The manager aligns with it. The manager suggests a project that develops the exact skill the employee fears lacking. The employee is motivated, not because they were told to be, not because they were manipulated, but because the suggestion aligns with their own desire, their own fear, their own ambition. That's influence built on understanding. And understanding comes from listening. Here's what you need to do. In your next conversation, commit to listening 70% of the time. That means the other person speaks 70%, and you speak 30%. And when you speak, it's to ask questions or to reflect back what you heard. You're not adding your own stories. You're not sharing your own experiences. You're focused entirely on understanding the other person. This will feel unnatural at first. You'll feel like you're not contributing. You'll feel like you should be sharing more. That's the old pattern fighting back. Push through it. Keep listening. And pay attention to what happens. Pay attention to how the other person opens up. Pay attention to what they reveal. Pay attention to the advantage you gain from understanding. This is where your real power comes from. Not from what you say, from what you understand. And understanding comes from listening. But listening and asking questions is only part of the equation. You also need to be specific about what you do say. You need to speak with precision. And precision creates authority. Chapter 6. The Specificity Principle. Most communication fails. It fails because it's too vague, too general, too abstract. People talk in concepts that mean different things to different people. People use jargon that obscures meaning instead of clarifying it. People speak in hypotheticals instead of realities. And as a result, nobody actually understands what they're saying. And nothing gets done. The strategic communicator does the opposite. They're ruthlessly specific. They use concrete examples. They use numbers. They use clear language that cannot be misunderstood. Vague language creates vague outcomes. That's the key. Let me show you how this works. A manager says to their team, "We need to improve our performance." What does that mean? Each person interprets it differently. Some think it means to work faster. Some think it means higher quality. Some think it means better customer service. Some think it means higher revenue. Nobody knows exactly what the manager wants. So nothing changes. Or everything changes randomly. And the manager wonders why the team didn't improve performance. A strategic manager says this: "We need to reduce our average response time from 48 hours to 24 hours by the end of the month." Now everybody knows exactly what success looks like. Not only that, but the team can work backward from that specific goal. They can identify what needs to change. They can measure progress. They can celebrate when they hit the target. One manager gets vague effort. The other gets focused execution. When you speak with specificity, you signal that you know what you're talking about. You signal that you've thought about the details. You signal that you have clarity. And clarity creates authority. Compare these two pitches. First person, we should probably do something about our social media. It's kind of important, and we could get more engagement if we tried harder. Second person, we need to post 3 times weekly on LinkedIn with performance-related content that drives clicks to our sales page. We'll track conversion rates and adjust content based on what drives the highest conversion. One person sounds like they're thinking out loud. One person sounds like they've already decided. One sounds like an opinion. One sounds like a plan. Guess which one gets funded? Guess which one gets implemented? Specificity is the language of authority. That's the key. Here's what I want you to understand. Every time you speak vaguely, you're essentially asking permission. You're suggesting that the idea isn't fully formed, that you haven't done the work, that maybe someone smarter should decide. But every time you speak specifically, you're declaring, you're asserting, you're taking ownership. Now, there's something even more powerful than specificity in language. It's specificity in numbers. When you attach metrics to your communication, you create objectivity. You remove emotion. You create measurable outcomes. And when the outcome is measurable, people can't argue with it. A coach says to an athlete, "You'll get faster." That athlete doesn't know what success looks like. They don't have a target. They're just hoping. A strategic coach says, "We'll get your 40-yard dash time down from 5.2 seconds to 4.8 seconds in 12 weeks. Now the athlete knows exactly what success is. They can work toward it specifically. They can measure progress. They can celebrate when they hit it. Numbers eliminate debate. That's the key. Think about a presentation where someone says, "Sales are up." Okay, that could mean anything. That could mean 1%. That could mean 100%. The number means nothing without context. But a strategic analyst says, "Sales are up 23% quarter over quarter, driven by a 45% increase in repeat customers." Now the number means something. Now you can evaluate whether that's good, whether it's sustainable, whether there's something to celebrate or something to worry about. Numbers create clarity. Clarity creates alignment. Alignment creates action. Here's what you do starting today. Before you communicate something, ask yourself, can I make this more specific? Can I add numbers? Can I create a measurable outcome? Can I be so clear that there's zero chance of misunderstanding? If you say soon, specify when. If you say better, specify by how much. If you say important, explain why and quantify the impact. Remove vagueness. Replace it with specificity. Replace it with numbers. Replace it with clarity. This is how you move from being someone who talks a lot to being someone whose words matter. This is how you build real influence. But there's one more element. And it's counterintuitive. It's admitting what you don't know. Chapter 7. The Authority of Admission. This seems completely backward. How does admitting what you don't know increase your authority? How does saying you're wrong increase people's belief in you? But that's exactly how it works. Here's the principle. When you admit what you don't know, you gain credibility on what you do know. Why? Because people perceive honesty as trustworthy. They perceive someone who's willing to admit limitations as more credible than someone who claims to know everything. Admission of ignorance increases belief in expertise. That's the key. Think about this. If someone claims to know everything about their field, you immediately distrust them. You know that nobody knows everything. So if they're claiming to know everything, they're either lying or delusional. Either way, they're not trustworthy. But if someone says, I know a lot about this field, and I know there's a lot I don't know. I've encountered X, Y, and Z situations. I haven't encountered this situation, but here's how I'd approach it based on what I do know. Suddenly, they're credible. They're honest. They're humble. And that honesty makes their expertise more valuable. An expert admits, I don't know the answer to that specific question, but here's what I do know that's relevant. And here's how we'll find out the answer you're looking for. A fraud makes something up, or deflects, or pretends to know, and everyone can sense it's fake. Who would you rather trust with your problem? The expert who admits their limitations, or the fraud who claims to know everything? Now here's the art of this. You can't just say, I don't know, I'm not informed, I'm sorry. That destroys authority. You have to admit the limitation while simultaneously demonstrating competence. A doctor knows they shouldn't treat a patient for something outside their specialty. So they say this, that's outside my area of expertise as a general practitioner. But based on your symptoms, I'd recommend seeing a neurologist who specializes in this. Here's who I recommend. That doctor just admitted they don't know. But in admitting it, they demonstrated competence in knowing their own boundaries. They demonstrated competence in understanding what the patient needs. They demonstrated competence in having trusted connections. So the patient respects the limitation and trusts the expert even more. Boundaries on expertise build trust in expertise. That's the key. A lawyer knows that they're strong in contract law but not criminal law. So they say, I'm a contract attorney. This is a criminal matter. I'm going to refer you to a criminal attorney I know and trust. But based on what you've described, here's how I'd approach the contract elements. That lawyer admitted their limitation. But in admitting it, they demonstrated judgment. They demonstrated integrity. They demonstrated knowledge of the boundaries of their expertise. And the client trusts them more. Here's something that most people miss. The most confident people are certain about what they know and transparent about what they don't. They don't hedge their bets. They don't qualify. They don't waffle when they know something. They're crystal clear. But they're equally crystal clear about their limitations. They're not wishy-washy across the board. They're firm about what they know. Firm about what they don't. A scientist demonstrates this beautifully. The scientist says, based on the current research, this is what we understand. This is the mechanism. This is the evidence. Here's what we still don't understand. Here's what we're currently researching. Here's the timeline for finding out. That scientist is credible because they're not claiming to know everything. They're claiming to know the boundaries of what we know. And that's actually more credible than claiming to have all the answers. Certainty about limitations is certainty itself. That's the key. Here's the practice. In your next conversation where you don't know something, try this. Instead of saying, "I don't know," try, "That's outside my expertise, but here's what I do know that's relevant," or "I haven't dealt with that specific situation, but here's how I'd approach it based on what I have dealt with," or "I don't have that data in front of me, but here's the process for getting it." You're acknowledging the limitation while demonstrating competence and a willingness to help. That's the balance. This is how you maintain authority while being honest. This is how you build real credibility. Not by claiming to know everything, but by knowing what you know and being clear about what you don't. You've learned how to ask questions, how to listen, how to speak specifically, how to admit limitations. But there's one more element that destroys all of this, and that's explaining. Chapter 8: The Price of Explaining. Every time you explain, you weaken your position. That's not a suggestion. That's not a theory. That's a law. When you explain, you're assuming one of three things. Either you're assuming the other person didn't understand you the first time, or you're doubting that they will, or you're trying to convince them that you're right. All three of these positions are weak. They all signal uncertainty. The strategic communicator states something once, clearly, with conviction. If questions arise, they answer them. But they don't preemptively explain. Explanation is an invitation to negotiate. That's the key. Let me show you how this works. A parent sets a boundary. Curfew is 10 p.m. What's the weak parent response? To explain. Curfew is 10 p.m. because I care about your safety, and I know you need sleep for school, and I've read research about teenage development, and I want to know where you are, and I'm responsible for you. What just happened? The parent handed the child ammunition. Now the child can argue with the research, can argue about the sleep need, can argue about responsibility. The boundary just became negotiable. The strategic parent states the boundary and stops. Curfew is 10 p.m. That's it. It's final. There's nothing to negotiate because there's no opening. There's no explanation to argue against. You have a choice. You can explain and invite negotiation, or you can state clearly and be final. Now let's talk about why you feel compelled to explain in the first place. Most people explain because they're insecure. They don't trust that their message landed. They're seeking approval. They're trying to get the other person to agree, or they're defending against judgment. Here's what's fascinating. When you explain, you reveal the exact insecurity that makes your message less powerful. You reveal that you don't believe your own words are enough. A CEO makes a decision and doesn't explain the reasoning in detail. Why? Because the CEO's authority is sufficient. The decision stands because the CEO made it. If the team has questions, the CEO will answer them. But the CEO doesn't spend time preemptively justifying. A middle manager feels the need to explain every decision thoroughly. Why? Because the manager isn't as secure in their authority. The manager thinks they need to convince the team that the decision is right. And the more explaining the manager does, the more questioning happens. The CEO maintains authority. The manager constantly loses it. This principle plays out everywhere. In sales, a weak salesperson explains their product. They go through features and benefits and justify the price. They're trying to convince the prospect that it's worth it. In doing this, they signal that they're not sure the prospect will agree. And the prospect doesn't. A strategic salesperson presents the solution, shows how it addresses the prospect's stated need, and then asks if the prospect wants to move forward. No explanation. No justification. Just clarity. And the prospect often says yes immediately. In relationships, a weak partner explains their feelings. I feel hurt because you didn't call me, and I was worried something happened to you, and I care about you, and I just wanted to know you were safe. A strategic partner states their boundary. I need you to check in when plans change. One is explaining and seeking understanding. One is stating a need. In presentations, A weak presenter explains every point exhaustively. They think that more information means more persuasion. So they explain and explain and explain. By the end, the audience is overwhelmed and understands nothing. A strategic presenter makes their point, supports it with evidence, and moves forward. No excessive explanation. No overjustification. Just clarity. Here's something crucial. Explanation is seeking permission to be right. When you explain, you're implicitly asking the other person to agree. You're asking for their validation. And the moment you ask, you've handed them power. The antidote to the urge to explain is clarity. Get so clear about what you want to say that one sentence contains everything that needs to be said. Get so confident in your position that you don't need the other person to validate it. Instead of explaining, get clear. Ask yourself, what's the core message? What's the one sentence that captures it? What's the one fact or figure or boundary that matters? Say that. Stop. Wait for questions. Answer questions directly. But don't explain proactively. Clarity eliminates explanation. That's the key. Here's the practice for the next week. Every time you feel the urge to explain, pause. Ask yourself, does this explanation add real value? Or am I seeking permission to be right? Or am I trying to prevent disagreement? If the answer is seeking permission or preventing disagreement, don't explain. State clearly instead. And notice what happens. Notice how people respond to your clarity versus your explanation. You're building confidence. You're building authority. You're building the discipline of precision. You've learned the principles. Now you need to understand your own baseline. You need to understand how much you should actually speak. Chapter 9. Building your communication baseline. There's a misconception that quiet confidence means never speaking. It doesn't. The principle isn't that you should be silent. It's important that you be strategic. There's a baseline. A sweet spot where you're communicating what matters without broadcasting noise. The baseline varies across contexts. That's what most people miss. You can't use the same baseline everywhere. In a one-on-one conversation with someone close to you, your baseline might be 40%. You're speaking 40% and listening 60%. That feels like a real conversation, like an actual exchange. In a team meeting, your baseline might be 20%. You're letting others speak and contribute. You're listening. You're asking questions. But you're not dominating. In a presentation where you're the primary speaker, your baseline might be 90%. You're presenting material. That's the context. The key is understanding which baseline applies to which context and sticking to it. Know your context. Know your baseline. That's the key. Most people don't know their actual baseline. They think they're quiet when they're loud. They think they're engaged when they're dominating. The gap between perception and reality is where they fail. So you need data. You can't change what you don't measure. That's the key. Here's what I want you to do. Pick a meeting that you attend regularly. A weekly team meeting. A monthly planning meeting. A regular one-on-one. Record it if you can. Or ask someone you trust to track your speaking time. Count how many times you speak. How long have you been speaking? Calculate what percentage of the meeting you occupy. Be honest about what you find. Most people discover that they speak more than they think. The person who believes they speak 20% of the time in meetings often discovers they speak 40%. The person who believes they're quiet often discovers they dominate. That gap between perception and reality is where the work happens. Once you know your baseline, you can adjust it. And here's the most powerful adjustment you can make. For 30 days, intentionally speak 30% less than you normally do. This is called the baseline reset. The first week is uncomfortable. You feel like you're not contributing. You feel like you're being passive. You feel like you should be saying something. That discomfort is the point. You're retraining your nervous system. You're developing the discipline of selective speech. You're learning what it feels like to hold your words until they matter. By week 2, you start noticing something. When you do speak, people listen more carefully. Your words carry more weight. The quality of what you say increases because you're not filling space anymore. By week 3, people start asking you questions. They want your input. They're noticing that you're quiet and they're curious about what you think. By week 4, you've reset your baseline. You've retrained your system. You've discovered that speaking less is actually more effective. And you've developed the discipline to maintain this new baseline. Speak less intentionally. Influence more naturally. That's the key. Now here's something important. 30% less is a baseline adjustment, not a permanent state. You're not trying to become the person who never speaks. You're trying to become the person who speaks strategically. So after the 30 days, you're not returning to your old baseline. You're maintaining this new one. This is the foundation of everything. Everything we've talked about assumes that you're speaking less overall. If you're still talking constantly, the strategy doesn't work. The principles don't apply. So the baseline reset is non-negotiable. Here's what you do. Commit to 30 days. Pick your primary context. The meeting you're in most often. The person you interact with most often. And commit to speaking 30% less. Track it. Notice what changes. By day 30, you'll have a new baseline. You'll feel the difference. And you'll understand why silence is powerful. Once you've reset your baseline, everything else becomes possible. Once you're speaking less, you can ask better questions. You can listen more deeply. You can use pauses strategically. You can eliminate weak language. You can speak with specificity. Everything we've discussed becomes available to you. The baseline reset is the foundation. It's the one habit that makes everything else possible. And once you've built this foundation, once you've changed your baseline, once you've learned to speak strategically, you're ready for the final integration. You're ready to put all of this together into one powerful framework. Chapter 10: The Integration and the Commitment. Everything we've discussed over the last 9 chapters might seem like individual principles, but they're not. They're interconnected. They work together. And when you integrate them, you create something exponentially more powerful than the sum of the parts. Let me walk you through how this integration works. You're in a negotiation. A critical one. The stakes are high. You're sitting across from someone who wants something you have. They're trying to get the best possible deal. You start by setting your baseline. You speak less than you normally would. You create space. You enter a listening mode. Then you ask questions. Not statements. Not presenting your position aggressively. Questions. What's most important to you in this deal? What are your constraints? What would make this work for you? The other person answers. They reveal what matters. They reveal their vulnerabilities. They reveal their actual needs versus their stated demands. You listen completely, not planning your response, not judging what they say, actually listening, absorbing, understanding. You're gathering intelligence. You're learning what they actually need. When they finish speaking, you pause. You don't rush to respond. You let the silence exist. And in that silence, they feel pressure. They start filling it with more information. They reveal more. They concede more. All because you're comfortable with silence and they're not. Then you speak. And when you speak, it's specific. You present your position with numbers, with concrete details, with clarity. No vague language. No hedging. No qualifiers. Just specificity. Here's what we can do. Here's why it works for both of us. Here are the metrics. And when they ask questions, you answer directly. If you don't know something, you admit it. I don't have that exact figure, but here's the process for getting it. You don't make things up. You don't pretend to know more than you do. You admit limitations while simultaneously demonstrating competence. And crucially, you don't explain. You don't justify. You don't defend your position. You state it. You stand by it. And you wait. Integration creates exponential influence. That's the key. The other person leaves that negotiation feeling like you were fair, like you understood them, like you were looking for a solution that works for everyone. Not because you said that, but because of how you communicated, because of your listening, because of your questions, because of your specificity, because of your refusal to over-explain or over-justify. And they agree to the deal. Not because you convinced them, but because they feel like they won. This integration works everywhere. In sales, in relationships, in leadership, in interviews, in any communication situation where influence matters. The principles stack. Now here's the timeline. If you commit to this, if you actually do the work, here's what happens. For the first 30 days, you focus on the baseline, on speaking less, on developing comfort with silence. This is the foundation. You can't do anything else until this foundation is solid. For the second 30 days, you focus on questions and listening. You ask questions constantly. You listen more deeply. You begin to understand people at a level you never did before. You discover that influence comes from understanding, not from persuasion. For the final 30 days, you focus on specificity, clarity, and presence. You eliminate weak language. You add metrics and numbers. You develop the authority that comes from certainty. You build your presence. By day 90, something has shifted. You've integrated the principles. You've built new neural pathways. You've retrained your communication system. And you are unrecognizable in how you communicate. Not because you've become a new person, but because you've removed the noise so that the real you can finally come through. Your 90-day transformation is real. It's measurable. It's visible to everyone around you. Here's what I want you to understand about this journey. You're not becoming someone new. You're not gaining a superpower. You're not learning magic. You're doing the opposite. You're removing obstacles. You're eliminating the insecurity that drives excessive talking. You're silencing the doubt that drives constant explaining. You're quieting the need for validation that drives broadcasting. The most influential version of you isn't a new version. It's you clearer, more focused, more intentional. It's you without the insecurity broadcasting. It's you with the doubt removed. It's you finally being yourself. You already have everything you need. That's the final principle. You already have the capacity for silence. You already have the ability to ask powerful questions. You already have the intelligence to listen deeply. You already have the clarity to speak specifically. You already have the wisdom to admit what you don't know. You just need to remove the obstacles that prevent you from using these capacities. And removing the obstacles is exactly what we've talked about. Removing excessive talking. Removing weak language. Removing the urge to explain. Removing the need for validation. Here's what happens when you do this work. Doors open. People listen differently. Opportunities come to you instead of you chasing them. Your influence expands. Your relationships deepen. Your presence becomes powerful. All because you spoke less. This is your 90-day commitment. Not a guarantee. A commitment. You commit to the baseline reset, to the questions and listening, to the specificity and clarity. You commit to integration. You commit to removing the obstacles. And by day 90, you'll understand something deeply. You'll understand that influence isn't about being the loudest. It's about being the most present. It's not about having the most to say. It's about saying the most that matters. It's not about broadcasting. It's about being. This is how you speak less and influence more. This is the law. And the law doesn't change. You now understand the law of minimal communication. You understand that more words mean less influence. You understand that silence is louder than speech. You understand that questions matter more than statements. You understand that listening is a form of power. You understand that specificity creates authority. You understand that admitting what you don't know increases trust in what you do. You understand that every explanation weakens your position. And you understand that your baseline matters. But understanding isn't enough. Knowledge without application is just entertainment. You have a choice. You can walk away from this audiobook and do nothing. You can go back to talking too much. You can go back to explaining. You can go back to filling the silence. You can go back to broadcasting weakness through excessive words. And nothing will change. Or you can commit. You can commit to 30 days of speaking 30% less. You can commit to asking one more question in every conversation. You can commit to sitting in silence instead of filling it. You can commit to removing weak qualifiers from your speech. You can commit to clarity over explanation. You can commit to being the quiet person in the room who somehow has the most influence. Here's what happens when you commit. People start asking for your input. Your ideas carry more weight. Your presence becomes magnetic. Your influence expands exponentially. Not because you're talking more, because you're talking less. The law is simple. Fewer words, more influence. The question is, which law will you follow? The old one that tells you more is better. Or this one, the one that will change everything. Your move. Start today. Speak less. Influence more. And watch what happens.